Sorry. Ma'am, we've run out of your meal. The tray landed in front of Dr. Evelyn Shaw with a quiet clatter. No cloth napkin, no silverware, just a plastic-wrapped sandwich, a paper cup of water, and the kind of indifference that didn't come from forgetfulness but from something deeper, older, and colder. The flight attendant's voice had been practiced, her posture polite, but her eyes didn't meet Evelyn's. Her tone didn't carry regret. Her name tag read Rachel Monroe. She was the senior attendant for Asteria Flight 614, flying from Atlanta to San Francisco, and she had just delivered a message Evelyn had heard her entire life, only this time. It was wrapped in airline protocol and sealed with a smile. Evelyn didn't respond. Not yet. She looked at the sandwich, chicken salad, pale, soggy, pressed between two slices of thin bread, the edges already curling. It sat like an afterthought, something someone grabbed in a rush from a backroom cooler. She'd seen gas stations serve better, but it wasn't about the food. It never was. The menu for first class on Asteria Airlines that month included lobster bisque, seared filet mignon, and a carefully paired glass of 2012 Chateau Margaux. Evelyn had pre-ordered it all, a small ritual she allowed herself on long flights, not to show status, not even to indulge, but because it reminded her of where she was now, of everything it had taken to earn a seat like 1A. She folded her hands in her lap, outside the window. The sky was soft and endless. Inside, the cabin hummed with low voices and clinking glassware. 2 rows behind her, she heard a cork pop. "Pinot," a man asked. "Indeed," said another, with a chuckle. She didn't have to look. She knew their faces. One was Jonathan Radcliffe, managing partner at a venture firm she'd once pitched a decade ago. He hadn't remembered her, of course. Not when she stood in his conference room at 34 with the prototype for Orion's first quantum security shell. Not when he told her, "It's brilliant, but we're really looking for someone with a little more presence." Back then, she had smiled and thanked him. 2 years later, the Pentagon bought the same tech. Now, she sat a row ahead of him, and he was being served his meal, her meal by name, Mr. Radcliffe. "Your bisque and steak," Rachel had said sweetly, not 10 minutes earlier. No one called Evelyn by name. The sandwich tray remained untouched. She turned slightly in her seat, just enough to see Rachel move down the aisle. The attendant's manner changed with each passenger she addressed, her smile wider, her tone warmer, her body language open. But none of that had been offered to Evelyn, and that, she knew, wasn't an oversight. It was a decision. She reached for her tablet and opened the Asteria app. Booking reference, meal selection, confirmation. 7 days in advance. All there, VIP tag attached. Her loyalty status, Diamond Prestige. She had logged over 100,000 air miles that year alone. This wasn't a glitch. She sat back. It was happening again. Different place, same pattern. Years ago, at a gala in Boston, Evelyn had approached the check-in desk with a printed invitation in hand. The woman glanced at it, then at her. "I'm sorry." She had said, "This entrance is for speakers." Evelyn had gently replied, "Yes, I know." She had been the keynote that night. Rachel passed her again now, pouring wine for the man in 1C, Peter Langston, another investor who once asked if Evelyn was in operations or marketing. She never forgot the tone, not mocking, just certain she couldn't be the founder. The sandwich sat between her and the world like a final exam question. How will you respond this time? She didn't eat. Instead, she tapped twice on her smartwatch, quietly, precisely, somewhere 2,000 miles away, in a high-rise office above Peachtree Street in Atlanta. A notification blinked on the screen of her assistant. Tara Mitchell. It was a soft flag. Internal protocol. Code FLT 614. Priority discreet. No anger, No escalation, not yet. But Tara would know what to do. She had been trained not only in communications, but in operational intelligence. She had access to Orion's private monitoring tools, many of which Evelyn herself had helped design. Data collection would begin before the plane landed. Evelyn leaned back in her seat and glanced around. 6 white men in tailored jackets were sipping wine. She was the only black woman in the cabin, the only person with a plastic tray, her mind sharp as ever. Recalled Another Day, Washington. 2007, a televised debate on cybersecurity. She had been seated far left on the panel. Midway through, the moderator referred to her as Dr. Ellis, confusing her with the older white man beside her. She didn't correct him. She had waited until her turn to speak, and when she did, no one forgot her name again. Now, high above the clouds, Evelyn felt that familiar weight on her shoulders, not of defeat, but of decision. Every time they overlooked her, they taught her how to respond with something stronger than noise, with evidence, with precision, and with resolve. Rachel Monroe didn't know who she had just dismissed, but she would. 9 minutes. That's all it would take. The plane hummed steadily as it sliced through the late afternoon sky. Evelyn didn't move. She remained seated, composed, eyes focused not on the sandwich tray but on something far more revealing: silence, not the peaceful kind, but the type she had come to know all too well, the silence that followed erasure, a sandwich instead of a meal, a ma'am instead of a name, a shrug instead of an apology. It had never needed to be loud. Dismissal never did. She tapped her smartwatch again. Twice this time. Short. Firm. Tara would recognize it as stage 2. That meant begin the quiet pull names. Behavior logs. Timestamps. Cabin footage. Nothing dramatic. Nothing public. Not yet. At the same time, in a quiet office on the 42nd floor of the Orion Tower in Atlanta, Tara Mitchell sat behind a dark glass desk, surrounded by humming servers and sleek whiteboards. She was 33, sharp-eyed, and so deeply familiar with Evelyn's signals, she often knew what was coming before the instructions finished blinking. A soft chime brought her eyes to the screen. Code FLT614, level yellow, begin passive trace. No subject line, no explanation, just the code. She leaned forward. Asteria Airlines was one of Orion's strategic tech partners, and through that partnership, Evelyn retained high-level monitoring access for VIP security auditing, especially in matters where private behavior conflicted with public policy. Tara opened the Orion Oversight dashboard and ran a silent query: Flight 614, Crew Manifest. There she was, Rachel Monroe, Senior Flight Attendant, ID AA7392. Tara pressed enter, launching the Bias Trace Protocol, a proprietary AI Evelyn had helped develop 5 years earlier, originally designed to detect unconscious bias in hiring panels and investor meetings. The system could analyze tone of voice, delay patterns in interaction, facial response discrepancies, and even body orientation ratios when serving diverse individuals. The system lit up. Red bands began to appear across several flights from the past 18 months. 2 complaints in the system, both vague. Both from women of color, flagged and closed with service standard deviation. No further action, but the pattern was unmistakable. Rachel Monroe consistently deprioritized non-white passengers in service, language, and interaction. Tara narrowed the data: first-class cabin only. The bias scores went from moderate to high. She frowned and began capturing the report set into a secure folder titled Project 1A. Back on the plane, Evelyn sat still, but her memory didn't. It was reaching. Pulling up another moment: a dinner in Palo Alto. Years ago, a tech conference mixer. Evelyn had been invited to speak on encryption in medical AI. She walked in wearing a Navy suit and her press badge. A young event staffer stopped her at the entrance. Sorry. Catering goes in through the side. Evelyn had blinked, then gently lifted the lanyard to eye level. Keynote speaker. Oh, sorry. The staffer had mumbled, but the correction hadn't mattered. The assumption had already landed. She hadn't told anyone that night, not even her own team, but she had remembered. She always did. On Flight 614. The chill of that same assumption had arrived in a different uniform, polished, buttoned, polite, but no less sharp. Rachel Monroe moved down the aisle now, holding a tray of desserts. Her voice shifted higher as she leaned toward Peter Langston. Would you like to try the chocolate mousse? Mr. Langston. It's from a French patisserie in Napa. Evelyn watched her from the corner of her eye. Not once did Rachel bend slightly, or pause, or smile when she'd spoken to her earlier. There had been no offer, no optionality, only a pronouncement. We've run out. But Evelyn didn't need her dessert. She needed the pattern. Her smartwatch vibrated once. A notification bias trace scan in progress. Initial behavioral discrepancy high. Another buzz followed. Tara Mitchell had uploaded the first summary. Rachel Monroe, 17 first-class flights analyzed, bias interaction ratio 81%, strong deviation in service time and personalization based on race and gender. Tara also flagged something else, Seat 1C. Mr. Jonathan Radcliffe had ordered the exact meal Evelyn had reserved 3 days after her booking. Evelyn opened her tablet. The data showed clearly lobster bisque and filet mignon. Assigned to Radcliffe. Hers had been booked a full week prior. His had been substituted in, not reassigned by system error, reassigned by human decision. She took a slow breath and allowed the insult to settle, not to be defeated by it, but to remember its shape. She had learned, long ago, that power didn't come from matching tone with tone. It came from letting facts speak louder than offense. Rachel Monroe didn't know that the woman she handed a cold sandwich to was the co-creator of the very system now mapping her every move. But she would, not by confrontation, by evidence, by precision, by every quiet tap that was never really silent at all. The moose passed Evelyn without pause. Rachel Monroe floated by again. All smiles and light steps, asking if Mr. Langston preferred the raspberry coulis or the vanilla. He laughed, a bit too loudly. She leaned in, her hand briefly touching his wrist as she poured another splash of wine. It was so small, so ordinary, and yet so precise. Evelyn didn't turn. She didn't react. She didn't need to. The vibration on her watch was enough. Match found passenger service discrepancy, 1A. Report received Monroe reassigned meal manually. Data conflict triggered. She opened the file on her tablet. Tara had already laid it out cleanly. Evelyn's meal, confirmed via booking reference, had been pre-ordered 7 days ago. Radcliffe's meal, the same lobster bisque and filet, was confirmed only 3 days ago. Evelyn's original assignment had been replaced, not by policy, not by chance, but by someone's hand, Rachel's. To be exact, her smartwatch buzzed again. A secondary match internal flight log timestamp showed a manual override for meal distribution by senior cabin crew Monroe logged in at 4:42 p.m. 19 minutes before takeoff. So, it wasn't a kitchen error. It wasn't a system mistake. It was a choice. And Evelyn had seen enough choices like that to recognize the pattern. The first time she truly understood what those patterns could cost her was in 1994. She had just graduated youngest in her class. One of only 2 black women in the computer sciences department. She'd been invited to a private panel for a job interview at a tech firm in Houston. They had flown her in, paid for the hotel, offered a car to pick her up, but when she arrived in the lobby, wearing her best navy suit and holding her resume neatly clipped in a black folio, the receptionist didn't look up. Recruiting forms are downstairs, the woman said flatly. I'm here for the interview, Evelyn had replied. Not unkindly, the woman looked her up and down, blinked once, then said, Oh, sorry, Just, you're not who I expected. Evelyn never forgot that phrase, even when they gave her the job. Even after she turned it down. The phrase stayed. You're not who I expected. Back on flight 614. A different variation of that phrase hung in the air. Unspoken. A male flight attendant approached from the opposite direction now. He was older, with salt and pepper hair and a badge that read Daniel Clean. His manner was quieter than Rachel's, more cautious. He leaned slightly toward Evelyn's row. "Is there anything else I can bring you?" "Ma'am," he asked. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I'd like to ask you something." "Mr. Clean," she said. His brows lifted slightly. "According to Asteria's policy, how are premium meals prioritized when there's a shortage?" Her tone was even, her gaze steady. He hesitated, visibly uncomfortable. Typically by booking time, status, and frequency." "I see," she said, without blinking. "I'm a Diamond Prestige member. Booked this flight 2 weeks ago. Meal confirmed 1 week ago. Seat 1A. Daniel nodded. "Yes, ma'am. That would normally put you at the top." She let the words hang. "Then perhaps you can explain," she said quietly. "How my meal was reassigned to a passenger who booked 3 days ago." He swallowed hard. There may have been a system update, or sometimes the cabin crew is given discretion if she echoed, if a guest is deemed higher priority based on circumstances." He finished weakly. She gave a small nod. Not angry, not loud, just final. "Thank you," she said. "That'll be all." He stood a moment longer, unsure, then turned away. She returned to her screen, opened the internal staff profile Tara had forwarded. Rachel Monroe, senior cabin crew, employed since 2017. Previously received 2 internal reports for inconsistent service patterns. Notes included phrases like selective attentiveness and non-uniform engagement. Nothing serious. No disciplinary action. Just nudges. Suggestions. Blind spots marked informal coaching recommended. Evelyn saved the report to her archive. She didn't want an apology. She didn't want a free voucher or a perfunctory visit from the purser. She wanted the truth recorded. And the pattern confirmed. Outside the window, the sun dipped lower. The clouds turned gold. Then a soft blue-gray. She closed her eyes. Not to rest, but to remember everything. The sandwich. The voice. The moment Rachel didn't say her name. The exact moment they assumed. Once again, that seat 1A must have been assigned in error. But this time, the error wasn't hers. It was theirs. And when they finally realized it, it would be too late. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber as the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our final descent into San Francisco. Please ensure your seatbelts are securely fastened." Evelyn Shaw opened her eyes slowly. She hadn't slept. She hadn't needed to. Her body sat motionless in 1A. But her mind had been active the entire time, calculating, confirming, remembering, every detail collected, every name filed away, every silence remembered. She reached for the seatbelt and fastened it with calm precision. Around her, the bustle began, passengers adjusting their seats, brushing off crumbs, folding away tablets. Rachel passed through the aisle with a practiced smile, checking latches, murmuring thank you and excuse me as if nothing had happened, as if nothing had been seen. But Evelyn had seen everything. She caught Rachel's eye for a brief second. Rachel looked away. The plane touched down smoothly, its tires hissing against the tarmac in a familiar rhythm. Evelyn did not clap or exhale. She had always considered landings the least remarkable part of a flight. What mattered came next. The aircraft taxied slowly toward the gate, as the doors unlocked and seatbelts clicked open around her. Evelyn remained seated. She adjusted the cuffs of her blazer, checked the leather strap on her handbag, and waited, not for permission, for precision. Rachel approached once more. Thank you for flying with us. Ma'am, she said, a slight edge of uncertainty now curling under the surface. Evelyn didn't respond. She rose smoothly from her seat, lifted her bag with one hand, and walked toward the exit without a glance back. Waiting at the jet bridge were two figures in dark suits. One was Brandon Ellis, Asteria's regional CEO for the West Coast. The other, a short woman with sharp eyes and a name tag that read Legal Affairs, Corporate Ethics Division. Brandon stepped forward. Dr. Shaw. He began. We sincerely... Evelyn held up one hand gently. There's no need, she said, her voice cool but even. What comes next matters more. She passed between them without pause, her heels clicking softly on the jet bridge floor. Brandon's mouth closed. The legal officer straightened. They had read the report. They knew exactly what she meant. Behind her, in the rear of the aircraft, the mood had shifted. Members of the flight crew were filing out, tired, expectant, already talking about hotel check-ins and crew shuttles. Rachel was near the front of the group, her bag wheeled behind her, her posture still composed, until she saw them. 3 individuals in black suits were stationed at the end of the corridor, 2 from Asteria's internal crisis team, and 1 from Human Resources Legal Review. One held a tablet. The screen lit up as they approached, displaying a quiet but final message. Flight 614 crew. Proceed to Emergency Debriefing Room 2. Immediate review required. Rachel froze. She looked to her left, then right. But the others around her had also gone quiet. Daniel Clean said nothing. He adjusted his tie. No one asked why. No one protested. They simply walked. The crew was escorted to a hallway of temporary glass rooms partitioned, coldly lit, and prepared for one-on-one interviews. No phones allowed, no explanations yet, only the awareness that something was no longer routine. Rachel sat in the interview room, her face a study in tight control. Across from her sat a woman in a navy blazer. A folder opened in front of her. Her tone was neutral, but firm. Ms. Monroe, we'll begin with flight-level service logs. Please confirm your actions at 4:42 p.m. during pre-flight meal allocation. Rachel blinked. I just followed standard reassignment due to availability. The woman didn't respond. She simply pressed play on a short video clip. Cabin footage. Evelyn in 1A. Meal tray delivered. No silverware. No courtesy. Then another clip. Rachel greeting Mr. Radcliffe, presenting the bisque and filet with a beaming smile. No narration. No accusation. Just contrast. Just fact. Rachel opened her mouth again, then closed it, back in the terminal. Evelyn walked alone through the polished corridor. Her pace was unhurried, but each step was measured. She passed by a window and caught her reflection poised, controlled, but not invincible, and not unaffected, because beneath her calm, something deeper stirred, a memory, not of a flight, but of a boardroom, 5 years ago. A conference table surrounded by her own team. Evelyn had just been named executive chair of Orion's Global Expansion Unit. It was the kind of role she had once dreamed about. And yet there was doubt, not from outsiders, from within. One of her senior engineers had voiced it first. In a meeting he thought was off the record. She's brilliant. He'd said, but she's not tough, too restrained, too careful. I just don't think she can carry the expansion at this scale. It wasn't an attack. It was worse, it was pity, disguised as analysis. She had led that expansion successfully, tripled Orion's market value, secured the company's foothold in 5 countries. The engineer had never apologized. He'd just smiled at the next meeting and said, glad it worked out. Now, as Evelyn turned the corner into the private arrivals lounge, she felt that same judgment drifting again, not from a colleague, but from a flight attendant. You don't look like who belongs here. You're too calm, too composed, too much in control to fight back. But Evelyn Shaw didn't need to fight. She just needed the system to reveal itself, and this time, it had. The conference room on the 17th floor of Asteria Airlines corporate headquarters in San Francisco was brighter than Evelyn expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a clear view of the bay, and the boardroom table gleamed with the polish of formality. She didn't take a seat at the head. She never needed to. She chose the chair second from the left, just close enough to the screen. Just far enough to remind them she didn't come here for show. She came for clarity. Across from her sat Charles Edmonds, the global CEO of Asteria, early 60s. Silver hair. Reputation for progressivism, but also for maintaining the illusion of control. To his left was the company's chief legal officer. Beside them, 5 regional directors. All silent. All slightly too still. A projector screen flickered to life. At exactly 8:01 a.m., a remote video connection appeared. Tara Mitchell was on the line, seated in her office at Orion Tower. Her posture was as composed as her voice. "Thank you for allowing me to join remotely," she began, her tone professional but unyielding. "At Dr. Shaw's request, I've compiled a preliminary report on behavioral patterns from Flight 614, as well as related service data across other flights involving the same crew member." No one interrupted. Tara tapped once on her tablet. The screen split. Left panel cabin footage from Flight 642. Rachel Monroe handing Evelyn the uncovered sandwich tray. No eye contact, no apology, no options. Right panel, Rachel Monroe greeting Mr. Radcliffe. A full course placed carefully on linen. His name spoken twice. A soft laugh. Wine poured at a perfect angle. The contrast needed no narration. Next slide, response times. Average time for first-class passengers receiving meal service. White male passengers, 2 minutes. 14 seconds. Dr. Evelyn Shaw, 9 minutes. 03 seconds. Then came the bias trace index. A colored bar graph appeared. Across 17 flights. Rachel Monroe's service interaction score dropped by over 38% when addressing non-white passengers. The legal officer shifted in her seat. A pause followed. Tara continued. "Furthermore, we reviewed the reassignment of meal preferences. Dr. Shaw's pre-ordered meal was logged 7 days in advance, at 4:42 p.m. on the day of departure. That meal was manually reassigned to passenger Jonathan Radcliffe, whose booking was finalized just 72 hours prior." She looked into the camera. The system didn't make this decision. A person did. Silence. It was the kind of silence Evelyn knew well. Not confusion, not disagreement, recognition. She let it linger. Edmonds finally leaned forward, his elbows resting on the polished table. "Dr. Shaw," he said slowly, "we deeply regret what happened. On behalf of Asteria, I want to..." Evelyn raised a hand slightly, not abrupt, but final. "I'm not here for regret," she said. "I'm here for accountability." Her voice was low, even, but it stopped the air in the room. I've sat in too many rooms where data like this was dismissed as unfortunate oversight, where people like Rachel Monroe were sent to more training, where internal coaching replaced real consequence. That cycle ends here. She reached into her briefcase and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "Your internal ethics code, section 6.3.2, behavioral discrimination. If substantiated by repeated patterns even absent explicit intent warrants immediate action under ethical misconduct." The room stayed still. Then, from one of the directors, "Would you be willing to advise our training division on this?" Another added, "We'd like to rebuild this process, properly, with oversight." Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She looked out the window, the blue of the bay steady in the distance. Then she turned back. "Not unless this is real. Not if I'm just a checkbox in your recovery narrative." She paused. "I don't need to fix your company's image. I want to know your culture won't forget this next month, or next year." Edmonds met her gaze, and this time, he didn't blink. "We'll issue a public statement today, Full suspension of the crew pending investigation. Rachel Monroe will be placed on immediate leave. And yes, if you'll accept, we'd like you to serve as an independent advisor to help reshape how we define luxury service. Another silence followed, but this one was different. Evelyn nodded once. It wasn't a yes. It was a beginning. In her mind, a recent memory surfaced. A charity gala in New York. Just last fall, she had arrived at the venue's side entrance, escorted by a junior colleague. A young man at the checkpoint held out a scanner and asked, "May I see your credentials?" Her photo had been on the wall inside the ballroom. She was the keynote. Even after scanning her QR code, he hesitated. "Sorry." He said, "We've just had issues with impersonation." She didn't argue. She simply stepped aside, opened her phone, and sent one message to the director of the event: "Reevaluate your team. Your guest of honor was almost denied entry." That message had done more than any confrontation ever could. Just like today, in the boardroom. As the final report closed and the screen went dark, Evelyn gathered her things. "I'll be in touch," she said, and with that, she walked out, not triumphant, not vindicated, just steady, unapologetic. She had spoken just enough, and the sky above Asteria Airlines had shifted. The story broke less than 24 hours later. The New York Times headline read, "Black CEO served cold sandwich in first class, then quietly shuts down an entire flight crew." By mid-morning, the clip had spread. Evelyn, seated in 1A, receiving the sandwich without eye contact, without acknowledgement, no anger in her face, no raised voice, just the image of a woman watching a system fail her in real time. People didn't share the story because it was shocking. They shared it because it was familiar. By the end of the day, the hashtag #Seat1A trended across platforms. Stories poured in. Thousands of voices, many quiet for too long, began sharing their own cold sandwiches, their own missed greetings, their own moments of being looked through. "I was told my credentials were missing. I was the speaker. They served everyone around me, but forgot me twice. I don't sit in seat 1A, but I've felt exactly what she felt." Evelyn didn't post. She didn't speak at any press conference. She declined interviews from CNN, BBC, and even Forbes. Instead, she sat in her apartment in San Francisco, looking out over the water. Her phone buzzing with alerts she didn't answer. The world was doing the talking now, and she had learned long ago that sometimes silence makes a sharper echo than sound. She scrolled through a few headlines. One caught her eye. "Bloomberg luxury is being redefined, and it's about time." Another from a tech outlet: "When quiet power corrects loud systems, Dr. Evelyn Shaw and the reckoning at 35,000 feet. She closed the browser and returned to her own files. Her hands moved gently over her tablet, organizing folders labeled not with scandal, but with strategy, because she knew what came next. Statements were easy, policies were harder, but culture didn't change because people were embarrassed. It changed when someone refused to look away. She leaned back in her chair and thought of a moment 6 years ago, sitting across from the nomination committee for a Fortune 100 company's board of directors. She had been shortlisted, her credentials unmatched, her name on 3 patents, her company valued at $8 billion. But during a closed-door conversation, one committee member had said plainly, "It's not personal. We've just never had a black woman on the board before. That kind of change, it's sensitive." They had chosen a man with less experience but easier optics. No one in the room had objected, and Evelyn had walked out. Not because she was surprised, but because she was done asking for entry into rooms that feared her presence. Now, the world had entered her room and found it full of receipts. That evening, Asteria's official statement was released. It acknowledged the internal investigation, confirmed the crew's suspension, and named Evelyn as an incoming advisor for equity and service culture reform. But it was the final sentence that caught attention. "We are not just correcting this moment. We are correcting a mindset." Thousands reposted that line. Some praised it, others mocked it, but no one could deny that something had cracked. Back in Atlanta, Tara sent Evelyn a quiet message. 9287 personal testimonies submitted to our open portal in 36 hours, all referencing Seat 1A. Evelyn replied with only 2 words. Document everything, because this wasn't about a tray. It was about a template, a blueprint of dismissal that had been tolerated for too long, and now, finally, someone had traced it in real time, in first class, on a quiet flight over America. Late that night, Evelyn received a letter forwarded to her personal inbox. It was from a flight attendant, not from Asteria, from another airline. I've seen this happen. I've even done it without thinking, but I watched your face in that video, and something in me cracked. I'm sorry, and I'm going to do better. Evelyn didn't reply, not because she didn't care, but because the apology wasn't for her. It was for every passenger who sat quietly, ate the cold sandwich, and told themselves it wasn't worth speaking up. The echo of Seat 1A was no longer in the cabin. It was in corporate inboxes, in board meetings, in training manuals being rewritten. It was in the way people paused before speaking someone's name, or forgetting it, and Evelyn knew if that pause stayed, if it stretched long enough to become awareness, then change had already begun. She turned off her screen, and for the first time since the flight, she smiled, just slightly, because this time, the silence didn't erase her. This time, the silence was hers. 3 weeks later, the skies looked the same. Planes still took off. First-class meals were still plated. People still walked down jet bridges wearing expensive shoes and silent expectations, but something had shifted. Not in sound, not in spectacle, in attention. At Orion Tower, Evelyn sat in her quiet corner office, sunlight tracing lines across the floor. Her inbox was full partnership requests, speaking invitations, offers to sit on boards that once hesitated. But she wasn't reading those. She was rereading a letter. It came from a 16-year-old girl in Tallahassee, handwritten in blue ink on lined notebook paper. My counselor told me to be realistic. He said people like me, I'm black, from a public school should focus on safe careers. He said tech might be too competitive. I didn't cry. I just went home and typed your name into Google, and then I saw the video. I don't know if I belong yet, but I wanted to say thank you, because you didn't yell, you didn't fight, you just stayed still, and everyone had to notice you anyway. Evelyn folded the letter, placed it on her desk, and reached for a fresh sheet of paper. She didn't type her reply. She wrote it by hand carefully, the same way she once wrote her first lines of code, in pen, on paper, before anyone trusted her with a keyboard. Dear Mia, people will assume you don't belong in places they've never seen someone like you. They'll say it kindly. Sometimes they won't say it at all. Don't get angry, not at first. Just stay where you are. Stay long enough for their certainty to turn into confusion. Don't let their doubt make you small. Let it make you quiet and sharper. The world will tell you to speak louder. I'm telling you to speak clearly. And when you do, don't waste time trying to be impressive. Just be undeniable. You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to be right. At the right time. She paused, then added one final line, P.S. You have the right to sit in seat 1A. If someone questions it, ask them who do they think it was designed for. She signed it, placed it in an envelope, and sealed it. That evening, Evelyn boarded a flight to Cape Town this time. Not for business, but as a guest of the Global Leadership Forum. She didn't book seat 1A. She didn't request anything. But when she boarded, she paused. There, mounted on the wall above the first row, was a small brass plaque. It read, "Reserved the seat of change, in honor of Dr. Evelyn Shaw." She said nothing. She simply took her seat, fastened her belt, and looked out the window. The sky was the same, but now it was wide enough for more. If this story resonated with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to give it a like and subscribe so you won't miss more stories about quiet strength, everyday injustice, and the powerful moments that remind us silence doesn't mean surrender sometimes. It's strategy.